Actually, one of the big things that we discussed in DF Direct Weekly 258 was the potential price of a next generation PlayStation, a PlayStation 6, if you will. And John, you were basically very, very upfront about your worries about the cost for the new console. And so I actually went back to the supporter Q&A post on Patreon and said, well, what would be an agreeable price for PlayStation 6 for you guys, right? And I think that's a really interesting point for discussion. We've got this interesting post from Will Cooling, awesome name, basically trying to put things into context. I ran the base PS5 unit American launch price through an inflation calculator, and its new price is only $20 higher than what you would expect given inflation. Is the issue actually that console users got used to deflation, which in economics is actually considered a bad thing because it encourages people to put off purchases and discourages investment? Maybe it is, but it also encourages a lot of console sales, I think it's fair to say. Whilst we all want things to be cheaper, is moving to a situation where consoles don't decline in price actually a step we need to make to have a healthier ecosystem? Well, there's certainly adjustment taking place there, isn't there? But I'm going to just sort of read out some comments from supporters on how much they would actually pay for a PlayStation 6 here. James Jackson, it's hard for me to say what I would pay for a PS6. I'm generally happy with my PS5, but I play games on my Switch 2 and PC far more frequently. I definitely won't be buying a PS6 at launch, regardless of the price. But if we really do hit $1,000 for new console hardware, I'm probably done for the foreseeable future, or unless I get a more lucrative job. Connor J. Hello, Foundry Gents. In response to your question about PS6 pricing, as a lifelong console gamer who still has an Xbox, but recently got a console equivalent PC for $850, I think that price or higher would simply be too much for me or most people in a world with closed marketplaces and increasing reliance on digital media. If the rumors John mentioned previously are true and PS6 supports no physical media, I'm curious if Project Helix will end up the same. $700 for PS5 Pro was a little high for me, but I think day one new hardware at that price or lower would be at least a little more compelling. Tony Escobar gets straight to the point, $700 max. Yeah, that's what I like. It would certainly save me having to read out lots of stuff. Leator says, hey ho, DF team, I'm still not ready to leave consoles behind and will pre-order most likely both PS6 and Project Helix. While I still hope for a price point below €800, I'd be willing to pay up to 1K. But also, I think we're not pushing current gen hardware enough. Sometimes it seems like Switch 2 is the only hardware still surprising me. That's an interesting point. Retro Sean, I think $700 to $800 for a good modern gaming experience is what I would pay for a new console. That's what I paid for a new graphics card the last few updates. To me, the value of a console is better support for TV and living room adjacent technologies. And the mighty Ethan, hey DF, exclamation point, to answer Richard's question about the PS6. Much to my chagrin, I must admit I'm one of those price insensitive enthusiasts who want the latest and greatest that analysts say are propping up the traditional game industry.
Like Oliver.
I would probably winter any launch price over $600, but realistically, I'd probably buy one as long as it's less than $1,200.
Oh my God.
Assuming it looks to be a significant increase in capabilities over my PS5 Pro. Finally, Simon says, put your hands on your head. Simon actually says, hello, long-time watcher, many years, first-time subscriber and poster here. My budget for a console would be entirely dependent on its capabilities and performance. If the value is there, I'd be interested. I'm happy to save up for longer to purchase something more expensive but with more performance and features. That said, I would prefer under £700. Pre-components, rise economy. Now unrealistic. What do you make about that, John? Where would you ideally like to see a next-generation PlayStation land? I mean, bearing in mind the realities that we're facing at the moment.
And this is a tricky one, Rich, and it got me thinking about the comment above from what's his name, Will something, Will Cooling,
yeah,
and inflation, deflation, and all that. And I went back and looked at, okay, what other expensive consumer electronics are people buying? Obviously, phones are a big one, right?
Yeah.
Take this data point for what you will. But in 2007, the original iPhone had a $499 and a $599 model, right? Out of the gate, first generation. In 2026, Apple sells a $599 iPhone 17e, right? So they're still offering a phone in that sort of original, regardless of inflation, they're offering it in that same similar number category as the original iPhone, which I think is actually very important to continue to offer products that remain within a certain window of affordability for the historical like success of a product.
Okay.
And if the PlayStation jumps up significantly from where the PS5 launched, it will. I think that's potentially a problem for adoption, essentially, because I do think the actual traditional console price window matters, and it has steadily increased somewhat, I would say, over the years. Obviously, there was an anomaly with, like, say, the PlayStation 3, with its $5.99,
Yeah, somewhat.
$4.99, $5.99 price, right? And then there was attempts like 3DO, which were way out of line with where the market was. And I think people do expect some price increases, but I feel like going above $4.99, having no console available for $4.99 or less, greatly limits the market.
Right.
And I think it just changes the equation for what people want, because I think consoles are probably a little less popular these days anyway. Like they still seem to be selling well, but I don't know. There's a lot of other forms of entertainment out there, and I feel like it's getting harder and harder for families to justify that kind of cost. But I mean, I don't have the numbers, so I don't know what it'll be. And obviously, there's the reality of where prices are going that makes that very difficult to achieve. So, I mean, what do you think about that? That idea that, consoles there should be a console available within a certain price point, in order to find mass market success, or at least long term, the price should fall as it traditionally has,
Yeah.
in order to get that audience.
I think in theory, it makes perfect sense, right? Because the cost of making these things is very, very expensive. Can be primarily offset by certain ecosystem inputs like license fees on games, for example. That's traditionally how it's been done. But I think, as I said in 258, the thing that's changed now is that the concept is that you don't actually sell the console at a loss for a very, very long time. You actually break even, and then it's kind of like all gravy. But that hasn't really been happening. So it's basically a question of whether it's going to be happening or not. I also think there's other pressures on Sony in particular, and to a certain degree Microsoft, where and you see it yourself with your boy, right, John? He's not particularly interested in consoles. He's more interested in PC.
That's right.
So there's what's happening now is that the people buying consoles for the most part are the same people that have bought them for the last 10, 20 years, which means that you've got a kind of a limit to your total addressable audience, which isn't particularly good thing to happen. I think maybe what Sony's doing with the handheld there potentially is going to change things a bit. But it's really, really tricky in terms of getting that price right and certainly paying for it. The inflation just from 2020 alone has been huge, as Will Cooling there points out.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, is that there have been moves to increase the prices of games, but generally it's still sort of $60 to $70 within that 5-year period. So there's inflation must be having a bit of an impact there as well. Well, I'm kind of curious where you sit on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky situation just because of the component cost increases, silicon costs going through the roof, and everything else. But I feel like the PS6 is gonna kind of move towards where the PS5 Pro is, where it's more of a specialist device. And if you have, say £700 or something to spare, then you probably wouldn't be completely averse to 800 or 900 or whatever it costs, right? If you're someone who is much more price conscious and you haven't bought into previous generations of consoles, then maybe instead you're looking at the handheld, you're looking at the Switch 2, you're looking at a Steam machine. There are a lot of, in theory, more affordable options. But it might be the PS6, just by virtue of where the market is, has to become a more enthusiast device where, the addressable market is going to be a lot smaller. People are going to stay on the PS5, which is now, somewhat affordable, at least versus gaming PCs. So, yeah, maybe it's just kind of a reframing, and, Sony's other strategies will have to kind of counteract that difference in asking price for the mainstream device.
Do you think there's any sort of chance that this handheld could also birth a Series S type device? I don't think so. I think the handheld silicon's kind of best suited to handheld, but there is definitely a pricing issue here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could see a situation where you can plug it into, a TV like a Switch, and then it just kind of runs at a lower resolution target. Like, obviously Nintendo has proven that makes sense, but then you have to think about a lot of other situations about, okay, now you need to have a separate controller for that or whatever. But yeah, it's really tricky. I don't think anyone, Microsoft, Nintendo, PC manufacturers, nobody's like thinking, oh yeah, brilliant, this is our chance to really make inroads. Everyone's kind of thinking, okay, well, we just have to do the best we can with what we have. And I think, making lower cost devices is certainly one way forward. But, when the PS5 still feels like it's, in the middle of the generation and not kind of getting close to the end, maybe they say, the PS5 is still good and there will be a long cross-gen period again. So maybe you just need to stick with that for the foreseeable future.
John, I mean, the concept of extending the life cycle of PlayStation 5 is kind of a given at this point, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. And it really hits home. I was doing another side project recently and looking at a PlayStation 4 again. And I hooked up a PlayStation 4 and I realized this actually holds up really well in a way that the PlayStation 3 and 360 really don't.
Yeah.
And that it still feels suitably modern. I mean, there's parts of the UI that are a bit slow, but overall the experience is still quite good and it feels modern. That's going to go doubly true for PlayStation 5, making an upgrade even more difficult to sell. And this got me thinking about console gaming and what people are willing to pay. So think about it like this. Like, you mentioned publishers toying with game prices, right? And they're trying to increase it. And a lot of this comes down to game development costs are higher. They're taking longer to make. It's a more expensive process now. But is there a limit to this, right? Let's say you invest X amount of money and now you need to raise your price to, like, say $90, $100. I feel like there's like this limit where like the majority of people that spend money to buy games are simply never going to be willing to spend that much money outside of very select games, right? And so this starts to call into question, like, maybe budgets and development time and all that, expectations, they're reaching a point that's no longer manageable, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, it costs this much to make this game, so we need to sell it for this much, but maybe that amount being spent to make the game is actually too much, and the game has been scaled too high, and now you risk pricing yourself out of an audience, essentially. And I don't know what that number's like. I don't know how those numbers play out, but it just feels like there's this pushback where once you cross a certain threshold, you lose too many people.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of my concern right now, is like games. And this is something that Nintendo has been really good at, from what I can tell, is they've figured out the art of creating games that are, they don't feel cheap by any means, but they're able to produce good games at budgets that are seemingly more reasonable, right? And a lot of that's obviously the choices they make in terms of what types of games they're making, but by keeping that stuff in check, and even Nintendo had to raise their prices. Well, had to, I don't know. I assume that somebody within the maths had to math. There's certain series, certain games I think you can sell at a higher price. Mario Kart World is a higher price. I think there's no question that Rockstar can sell GTA 6 for whatever the heck they want and get away with it. But I don't think that's true for most companies, most games. So I don't know. We've really reached a tricky point now where just things are no longer like getting an appreciable boost in visual quality, like what you used to get from consoles, is costing significantly more money than it's ever cost. but the actual degree of increase in fidelity is like it's becoming smaller and smaller. The diminishing returns effect feels quite real. So, man, I don't know. I do think though this generation has been, there's definitely some things to complain about. I think image quality isn't quite what I'd like, but I do think that for the most part 60 FPS has become standard this generation, which is a really good thing in a way that it was not for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And most games are 60 or mostly 60. Sometimes, yeah, you give up a lot of image quality to get there, and a lot of this is down on certain decisions with Unreal Engine especially, but I do feel like the performance profile of games is already quite good, and trying to go too far beyond this seems difficult. I don't know. I'm just it's like stream of consciousness thoughts here off the cuff. So if I get anything wrong or totally off base, I apologize. It's kind of what I'm thinking about processing right now.
Yeah, it's a difficult one for sure, especially when you don't know what the proposition is. How are they going to sell
Yeah,
this to
exactly.
us?
We don't know. We don't know yet.
I think, there is a very good argument for keeping PlayStation 5 around for a really long time, because fundamentally the core issues of PS4 were very poor CPU and very, very poor storage. And if you look at the sort of balance of the PlayStation 5, it's a good machine. If it becomes a good sort of entry-level machine, so be it. But, the fundamentals are there. So the challenge then is basically, what do you do with, first of all, how do you price that machine? And secondly, what does the new one do that will make you want to upgrade? And that's going to be an interesting challenge for developers.
One thing
and Sony.
I was thinking about, Rich, I guess, is like, I feel like if they can find a way to get the PS5 shrunken down further and get the price back down to a more reasonable amount, but then also bring in this handheld that can play PS5 class games, and then keep this as sort of like a baseline kind of hardware, and then the PS6 can be like an upper end experience kind of thing. I don't know. I've somewhere in there, I feel like there's an idea for a way to keep the market flowing well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm just going to ask Will, how much do you think a PlayStation 6 should cost?
Oh, should is a difficult word, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it should cost maybe 800. I think that seems, I know it's ridiculous, but I mean, even if you said 700, people would still say, oh yeah, that's way too much. That's, if like your parent goes into a store and, they see a price that says $700 on it, then, at least for me, they're just going to be like, nah, sorry, this is not something you can have right now. So at that point, I really think that, your addressable audience becomes more of that enthusiast crowd, and then whatever is reasonable for the performance you're getting is fine. I think if you get up to 1,000, then that's another kind of mental hurdle that people will have to get over, because then they think, well, I could get a gaming PC for that. And that might not even be true, but, kind of 4 figures is probably a hard limit for me.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of figures.
I know, it's too many figures, but I mean, what can you do, right?
It's all the figures.
Yeah.
John, what do you think?
How much would I pay?
How much do you think it should cost?
Oh, how much?
Let's say you're Mr. Sony and you've got to price this thing, and you kind of want adoption, don't you? Where do you price it?
Gosh, I mean, I don't know the cost of the components or what they're trying to do, so it's hard to say. But I'd be afraid to go beyond something like $599 at this point. Mm-hmm. I really would want to do that.
Wow.
I think they might have no choice this time, unfortunately. But I feel like that's where I would like to see it, at least. Preferably lower, but I think that ship is sailing quickly these days, unfortunately.
I'd be so surprised if it came out at that price. That would be
I agree. I'd be surprised too. I just think like that's what I would want if I was in charge of that. I would be trying to do that, but like again, without knowing the realities of the cost of what they're attempting, there's so many factors here, and I'm sure they would love to get it out the door for
Yeah.
lower price, right?
Of course, yeah, definitely.
That's what they want to do. It's just what's possible. We don't know.
Well, there's two ways I'm looking at this. Number one is basically, let's just talk about the next generation console. And if it is that in isolation, I think you're right, John. I think, anything higher than $599 is going to scare people. It's probably not going to get the kind of adoption that you want. And it probably won't come with a physical drive out the box, at least.
Definitely.
So it's going to be tricky. However, if we're looking at this as a dual product launch, where you've got this amazing handheld, a lower power handheld, I think if that is sufficiently awesome, you could probably sell that at $599. And that would be your kind of your new product. It's amazing. It's like a Switch 2. You can run it portably, you can run it docked. You've got all of these great games running on it. That would kind of, for me, potentially soften the blow of having a much more expensive, all singing, all dancing console. So I'm looking at this more holistically in terms of the ecosystem as opposed to a next generation console.
Right.
And it wouldn't freeze out the PlayStation 5 users that much, I don't think, because I think the overall sort of performance profile of whatever this handheld is going to be will be probably less than PlayStation 5. At some sort of point between Series S and PlayStation 5, but with all of the modern architectural features that we've seen on Switch 2 have been transformative. So, if we're looking at things more holistically across the whole ecosystem, you could probably have a more expensive console that would be sort of, $800 or whatever. But you'd kind of need to have this entry-level device or lower-level device that is something really interesting and special, but would have to be priced quite aggressively, I feel. That would be really, really interesting. But if we are just talking about, right, we're going to launch a next-generation console, it's going to be super, super tricky to get traction, I think, on it for anything over $600. But I guess we'll just need to wait and see, right?
Exactly.
Man, crazy stuff. I'm kind of interested what other people think. I mean, obviously, the DF supporter program people out there are core enthusiasts, right? And they seem to be quite happy, well, quote unquote, happy, resigned, I think is probably the better word, to actually having a more expensive unit. But, that's not the core PlayStation audience, is it? So I'm going to be really interested to see how this pans out. But I am kind of seeing potentially this handheld as a bit of a wild card in there.